How's it going? This is some Overbridge fun here, which I'm quite enjoying. So yeah, Overbridge. I wanted to do an Overbridge video for a while. There's just so much I could do, and it just basically every time I've tried to do this video, I've just got carried away and spent hours making sounds. And some difficult video shit, but I won't bore you with. But yeah, we got Overbridge. I'm going to go through this project. I'm going to share this template, Ableton Live template. If you don't use Ableton Live, then obviously you can just kind of copy these settings. These pretty universal settings for everything. And just there's a few different ways you can wire up the Elektron rhythm. And I just want to kind of clarify because there's some difficulty, I think, certainly was for me in terms of like getting this set up and getting this seamless. And this template's been really useful for me. So yeah, first of all, right, so we've got like a lot of tracks here. So this is, as you might already see, this is all the tracks from the Elektron rhythm minus the ones that are choked. So there's no 4, there's no 8, and there's no 12 because those are like the hi-hat open, the cowbell, the hand clap, and the high tom. So we kind of don't need those. You could put them in if you wanted to, but I think those are just kind of cases of just just like if you want to do some extra kind of weird glitchy stuff. But generally speaking, this is kind of enough. You also don't need each track as well. You could just have one track and then send all your sounds, multiple sounds into one track. You don't have to have them separated out, but why not? So I think like this is arguably the most, I wouldn't say the most complicated setup, but the most in-depth that you could potentially manipulate sounds with, which I think is really useful. And it just looks cool, like just scrolling around. So like on this side is the sound sources from Ableton. So the thing that we're hearing right now is just a SH101 kick drum that I've created and I use all the time, and then that's being sent to the rhythm, and this is like a different sound. So this is the kick drum, and then we've got a different sound in here which we can't hear, that's not playing, and these sounds are being sent from Ableton Live via the audio, which I would talk about in a minute, into track 1 of the Analog Rytm. So you can turn it up here, turn it down here, obviously add effects and stuff. But these aren't sounds coming from the Analog Rytm or a sound source that's coming from the Analog Rytm. It's the sound source is coming from Ableton Live. We're just sending it through the Analog Rytm and processing it a bit like a plugin, basically. So you can see, like, I've got steps triggering here, but you can notice the kick drum isn't in time with these. There's kick drums happening elsewhere. This is kind of like the click, so we could put extra clicks in. So we're not adding kick drums, we're re-triggering something. So you might be wondering, like, what are we re-triggering? So we're re-triggering the envelopes. So we're re-triggering the amplitude envelope, the filter envelope, and then obviously if you wanted to have an internal sound, we've got that option as well. There's no samples in there, so it's just filters. And you might be able to hear that kind of chirping sound in the background. Like a this is like where there's sort of resonances running on some of the channels, and we can kind of hear that. So we can hear the resonant filters of the Analog Rytm as a sound source of the rhythm, and then the sound sources of Ableton Live being sent into there, basically. It's probably worth pointing out as we're looking at this, there's loads and loads of lights flashing, and we're only hearing a kick drum. So if, like, what I just said wasn't clear enough, this isn't triggering sounds, this is triggering processes or triggering envelopes. So as we start playing sounds or unmuting sounds in Ableton Live, we'll start to see how that triggers. So in Ableton Live, we've got so like if we just look at the track 1 or the bass drum track, so these names like bass drum, snare drum, these aren't the sounds that I'm creating, these are just the references to the tracks in the Analog Rytm. So bass drum, snare drum, rim shot, bass tom, bass drum, snare drum, rim shot, bass tom, that kind of idea. That's going to be really helpful. I'd recommend doing that because it gets a bit fiddly to track otherwise. And then I'm sending audio from this track, I'm sending audio to the Analog Rytm plugin. So this is different to like the system one. This is also different from the audio plugin. This is like the Overbridge engine that you would put in a MIDI track. So we're talking about this one. I'll just clarify that in a minute, but this kind of thing. So we're not picking out we're not using the Analog Rytm as a sound card. We're using the Analog Rytm as a kind of as a plugin. So we're sending audio to that plugin, and we want to send it to one of these, what they call side chains, 1 or 2, 3 or 4, 5 or 6, 7, 8. To send it to 1, you need to pan it left. To send it to 2, we pan it to 2. So just by a pan, this is the triggers happening not on this track, but on this one. So that's quite cool. So just by a bit of like, a bit of sort of modulation or whatever on some what would be the pan in Ableton Live, we can kind of do some kind of interesting stuff. I mean, and that's just the pan. Like, there's a whole ton of stuff we can do. So you might be wondering, how do I get this to appear? Because this is often, I think, a pain point for people to get this drop-down list. So if you go into your Analog Rytm plugin, there's this little button up here. You click on it, and this is your input routing. And you need to set all these to the particular track. So input routing 1 and 2, where do you want to send it? Input routing 1 and, in 1 and 2, on 3 and 4, this kind of idea. So you can kind of pick and double stack them. Actually, you can't have 2 bass drums. It will be like 1 track. So you can't say have a bass drum here as well, because it will disable this one. But that doesn't matter, because you can send, I could send this one to both tracks by having it in the middle, or I could send this one to track 1 by having it on the left if we were listening to it. We're not listening to it at the moment. So basically, you'd have as many Ableton Live tracks and sounds that you want and send them to the limited, well, not limited, but there's a limit on the tracks you can have in the rhythm. I hope you're following so far. So then what's this stuff over here? So this is the same named as these tracks. And this, I think, again, is really helpful. This is receiving that audio that we've sent to Analog Rytm back again into Ableton Live. So we're kind of monitoring it. As you can see, we're monitoring it. So where are we getting the audio from? Well, we're getting it from the Analog Rytm. We send it to the rhythm, we're receiving it from the rhythm, so it's the rhythm's the middle bit, obviously, that we're processing, and then we want to pick like what actual track we want to, and this is going to mirror to some degree the sidechain idea, but a bit more specific. So we didn't have to do any crazy panning on this one. We just select the bass drum or track 1, the snare drum or track 2, this kind of idea. There's also an input, so you can monitor what you're sending into the rhythm, which is pretty cool. I haven't actually done that, but I know, I forget which it is, the external or the input. I always get them muddled up. The audio in and the external in. The audio in, the audio in. So this is, I don't know which one this is, but basically you could boost the gain, because I know that's sometimes an issue on some of the inputs. So you could kind of have stuff running through external effects, but use that as an input if you wanted to. And again, we're not using the Analog Rytm as a sound card. It's just a plugin. And that's basically it. But there are a few things that are worth pointing out. So you might be, when you're looking at the drum machine, or the, what's it called, the 8-voice analog drum computer and sampler, you might be thinking, oh, I want to just like mute that bass drum, right? So you've got the bass drum running, and you think, I'll just mute it. But it doesn't mute the sound because the sound's not in the rhythm. That might be obvious because I've said it, but the amount of times you go automatically to, I just mute that kick drum, and the kick drum's not in this. The kick drum's in Ableton Live. So if you want to stop it in there, you'd have to stop it in Ableton Live. The mute, in fact, is just stopping, or muting, I should say, the triggers. So anything you've automated is like the terminology I always use, but anything you're triggering. So whenever you're triggering the filters or the amplitude, anything like that that's on this track, you're basically turning that off, which is kind of cool, because you can say, I want the sound to still be running, but I want to turn off all that processing and all those modulations. So it's not going to turn off the filter completely. It's not going to turn off, like if you've got any distortions running, it's not going to turn off that. But it's going to turn off what's being triggered. So anything that's like the filter's being triggered, the amplitude's being triggered, this kind of idea. If you've got LFOs that are set to like, what are they called? Trigs. Where is it? Actually, it's in the trig section. If you've got the LFO triggering, then, it would turn that off as well. The other thing is my audio routing. So before I do that, let's just talk about the actual plugin bit itself. So within the plugin on Ableton Live, let me just minimize that. We have the effects come through. So if I turn up the kick drum in the and there I am. See, you didn't see that because I haven't switched the camera, but I'm trying to play the kick drum off the rhythm. It's on Ableton Live. Okay, so the kick drum's running, and you might see if we turn up, if I turn up some delay on the rhythm, you can see the delays coming through here, right? So the reason that's happening is because I've got my audio routing on the rhythm to set the main outputs aren't being run through. So if I had this turned on, I'd also get the kick drum on this track. So you could obviously run all your tracks just through this one sort of channel strip if you wanted to, but I like separating them out. So I have the root to main tracks off, so all the individual tracks are not being sent out the main output. So that means the only thing that's being sent out the output is the effects, and this is what determines what gets sent to the effects, sent to effects. So all of the tracks are being sent to the effects of the analog rhythm, and the effects is being sent out the main. We can't turn off the kind of effects of main because that's just like baked in. Like anything that runs through the effects chains and distortion and compression comes out the main. So yeah, that's kind of it, right? So which is pretty cool. So just to reiterate, sound from Ableton Live out into a channel strip, into the rhythm, processed, back out of the rhythm, back into Ableton Live, and then we hear it, which is cool. So obviously, if it wasn't already apparent, we can process before we go in to the rhythm, and we can process when we come out of the rhythm. So we've got 3 stages of processing. So that's fucking amazing, right? So we could take this kick drum, and it's like a nice like 808y kind of 606y style kick drum, which is not surprising because it's a Roland SH101. So therefore, like most of that is kind of a similar era, slightly later than those drum machines, but similar kind of stuff. Yeah, if you didn't know, you can make cool kick drums on SH101. The SH101 or the Behringer is pretty. I haven't used one, but pretty bang on from what I've heard online. You can just make so many cool sounds with those synths, and they're pretty cheap. So the Behringer, that is, the SH101, is not cheap, unfortunately, which is a shame because they are amazing. Anyway, I digress. If we wanted to process this sound, we can process it here in the Ableton Live sample. So we've got the SH101. We can obviously do all the stuff we can do in Ableton Live, which I might do later on, and then we can run it into a processor. I've got it running into an EQ, so I'll turn the EQ off. A bit more of a kind of raster note on kind of, Nibbo, Castle Nikolai kind of style. I was just having some problems getting a good level, so I made it clicky. So we can process like as we would be able to in any DAW, like we can pre-post EQ, this kind of stuff. So this is kind of the sound in Ableton Live before it goes into the rhythm, and then we can switch to the rhythm, and then we can process it in the rhythm. So we've got at the moment we've got these kind of filters, so we could change how the filters work. We could turn the resonance up, a bit more clicking, and we could turn these ones off. Get some kind of weird sort of subtle grooves going on. We could turn up the distortion, what we're at 27, so we're distorting an external sound essentially into the rhythm. So that's quite cool. I'm feeling this pattern because it's a bit more chilled. And then once we've done that, we come back into Ableton Live, and of course you could then process what we're receiving in this channel strip, which currently is nothing. So you might wonder why haven't I EQ'd afterwards? Like, I just haven't, right? But I feel like a lot of the problems I found with the rhythm is not being able to send sounds into the rhythm and then EQ them, and then after I've done it, I can kind of put it on the master as opposed to individual tracks. Although obviously, like, why not put it on the individual tracks, right? But this project's like pretty empty at the moment. Which is worth mentioning the main. So what I've got on the main at Ableton Live, just so we're clear that how much of this is the analog rhythm? Well, not much, or quite a bit, depending on how you look at it. Like the SH101's the sound, and then the weird processing in clicks and the delays and effects is the rhythm. And then we've got the tube tech from Soundtube, which I'm a big fan of. Softtube. I'm a big fan of Softtube's plugins, like just insane. Speaking of which, if you want an SH101, the Softube plugin is the most accurate, 100%. Like I've done ABs, ridiculous, so good. So I use that a lot. But anyway, the Tube Tech's really good. It's just kind of like a gluey kind of compressor that's kind of nice for moving bass, and I use it occasionally when I just want to duck the bass. I like my DBX hardwares, but the software one, there isn't a soft one actually, unfortunately. There's a kind of DBX version one, but not the 160As that I have. So I have this to kind of control a bit of the movement, and then this is mainly just to make my life easier for YouTube. So I would never run typically a maximizing plugin on anything until I'm mastering it. But if I'm kind of monitoring something like this, then it's pretty handy. So this is the Vice MM1, which is like a cut down version of their big flagship. I can't remember what it's called, which I use for mastering. But this is really cool. You can just turn it up. As far as like quick plugins go for mastering, maximizing, this one is pretty cheap and pretty amazing. So for quick jobs like that. So this is making obviously a bit of a difference. If I just turn this up and then turn this one off, we got a massive level difference. And there's going to be a bit of pumping going on as we bring some sounds in, but just to be transparent. But this is the point, right? So whereas before we're doing everything in a rhythm, what if we just lean into those extra little things that we couldn't do before through Overbridge, which is exactly what Overbridge is for. So that's quite exciting. So I think I'm trying to remember. I think that's kind of everything to set it up. I'm going to provide this template in the description. So this won't be these sounds. It will just be like this whole arrangement, just blank. And then you can set up. You might find like maybe the Analog Rytm plugin doesn't load up, and then maybe these don't auto set, or if you change this, these will get wiped. But generally speaking, it should be fine. I do find occasionally if you've set everything up and it's triggering, your filters are open, like everything's working, everything should be working fine. You followed all those steps, and you're still not getting any sound. And the sequencer's running, right? Because you either need to hit the pad, or you need to like trigger it with the steps. I'd recommend doing the steps because the pad, you're going to have to keep re-triggering it every time, depending on your envelopes. It just makes a little bit life easier. If you're still not getting any sound, it could be that it's crashed, which is really annoying. So it seems to be something like there's two places you can check actually. But they're not going to, even if you check there, it still might not work, and it might not indicate that it's not working, which is kind of really annoying. But the first one would be to look up here. So like Analog Rytm should appear, and if you've got this set to auto select, it should just automatically find it. Sometimes it just will say, I can't remember what it said, like can't locate or something, like no location or something like that. It's just not looking, it's not able to look for it. So that's kind of frustrating, and I've tried different things to try to see if I can work out exactly what is creating that problem, and if I need to, like, I just need to turn the thing off and turn it back on again and it will find it. But I've not found an order other than resetting my bloody computer for that to kind of initiate sometimes, which is kind of weird. The other thing it does is it's the likelihood of it doing on this video is, I'd say probably 50%, maybe more. Is that it will just suddenly stop, and like the sequencer, so the Analog Rytm will be bouncing around, and then it will just stop, and Ableton Live will still be ticking along. So it's as if, and then you'll stop Ableton Live, you'll press start again. Sometimes it will start, and sometimes it won't. And if it doesn't start, before I pressed record on this video, I was like, everything was connected, pressing start, nothing happened. As I was clicking around on these tabs, all of a sudden it come alive. So there's obviously a bug there. So I don't know whether it's an audio unit bug or a VST bug or just literally an Overbridge bug. So what I did before this video, because I was using audio unit when it was doing it, I've switched out and running a VST1, and it took a while to find it again. So, we'll see if it's see if it conks out. But Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. So what I'll do, there's some interesting sounds in it, but there's something I was just playing around with just to test the other tracks that I thought was quite useful. Is so each one of these tracks on Analog Rytm are all doing like different processing. So I've got some with different effects, I've got some with different resonances. They're all kind of like, some of them have got LFO settings on there. I hope you're not hearing that dog going ballistic in the background. I'm sure you're not, but I can, and it's fucking dogs. No, I don't dislike dogs, but ones that bark like that are frustrating. It's distracting. Anyway, so they're all different processes on the Analog Rytm, and you can kind of drag the sounds through. So like if I have this sound running, I can click and drag it and put it somewhere else, which is very cool because so this is where I'm dragging it from here. And this is triggering between the snare drum and the bass drum, the bass tom. So different processes, which is really cool. So you can just set all the levels and then just different processes. This one immediately reminds me of a track by Richie Hawtin, like an old Richie Hawtin track on his Dimension Intrusion album, I think. The little point in the techno. So that's really, really handy because you can kind of just have like the movement of a track, like the automation, the trigs, that sort of idea, and then be like, and you've kind of got the sound, but they're not connected. They're just sort of separated. So you can be like, I wonder what this sound sounds like with this process, or that sound sounds like with that process. It's kind of like an effects chain, which is really, really cool. So I really like that. Like, and then we've got a different one here, which is a bit more, some different white noise. So you can kind of find them. Obviously the levels are a bit different for different sounds, but it's cool, isn't it? And obviously Ableton Live is like such a slick software in terms of just being able to manipulate stuff live like that. It really kind of opens up for kind of more creativity, which I think is really, really cool. Have I forgotten anything? I think, I guess you could wire up, like I'm not using any internal effects like delays and stuff in Ableton Live. So obviously you could do that as well. So like if we created, I don't know, like let's just put, what can we put here? Maybe just a basic, let's just use an internal one because that's easier. Let's just use a convolution reverb. We'll drop it in the return. So, and we can then sort of process like, process the sound. So this is interesting. We could process the sound of Ableton Live's sounds. Let's try and say that again. We can process Ableton Live sounds, right? So the source sound in this case is the SH101 sample. We can send that to the reverb. But notice this on the left speaker. This is kind of a little bit annoying, and this is because of the pan thing. There might be a better way of doing that. I've just not thought of one yet. So you could do basically make this. Let's put that on wet. You could just use a utility. The mono utility, not the bass mono. There we go. We could just use that to make it mono, or we could do that to make the input mono, which is more suitable. So we could then have the reverb is reverb. The reverb is mono. The input source is mono. So we've basically sent this kick drum into the reverb track, and we've made that audio mono because we've panned it left as opposed to it being sent left, and that way it's going to fire into both channels the same, and then we get a stereo reverb. So I think that's probably the best way to do it. So at least you get your stereo things. You just need to whack a mono on any returns if you want to do that. So that's pretty cool. But notice it's not the effect of the kick drum from with the clicks and everything, it's the pure one. It's just this one. So then you can stack it up and have the click one as well. So that's post Analog Rytm, which is very, very cool. So that's just, I love stuff like that. That's just a bit of wiring, a bit of configuration, and you've just got a couple dials and you've got a very different kind of sonic space that you can work with. I think that's awesome. So you could do that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but yeah, like if obviously this is just a basic kick drum, there's nothing too complicated at it, but if you put like, if we just grab the distortion pedal, right? So we'll just to kind of show like the kind of possibilities. So we'll grab this pedal. So we're going to put this, so the sound source of the SH101 kick drum from Ableton Live is had some EQ on it, and then we're going to distort it. So we're kind of like a bit like an envelope follower, right? That level is going into the Analog Rytm, and you can kind of hear it. So we're kind of getting all the noise from the sample, all the noise from the plugin, and then we're kind of manipulating that noise within the triggers here. It's just, and I just love the way it's like a very, it's depending on how your envelopes are set. Obviously, like I've got them set kind of like funky, so they do this weird stuff. But it's just you don't know where the sound is. It's worth mentioning as well. This kick drum is just a kick drum that's on every every beat of the bar, right? So just like 1, 2, 3, 4, this kind of idea. Obviously, if you've got a more interesting sequence than this, because this is just an audio, it could be a synthesizer in there, it could be anything. Then and it could be the loop points are different to what they are in the rhythm. You've got this kind of interplay, right? So, for example, I can kind of demonstrate it now. At the moment, we've got it as like 8 steps. That's a perfect division. But what if we have it 9? Now we've got like this disjointed kind of pattern. So you just got, I love stuff like that. Like this is something, I come from that sort of background with the 606 of 101, everything kind of having its own sort of metronome or its own internal sequencer. Having stuff like in time like that, or out of phase I should say, but in time is really, really useful. So yeah, but you just have something that's a bit more. Yeah, so I'm just like, and I don't know what's going to happen entirely because it's more cancelling out and where the envelope's folding. So I like that because it's a little less me deciding what needs to go in where. It's more about, I don't know kind of what it's going to do. So I'm just kind of playing around because there's a level of separation, which speaks to me a lot from the kind of equipment I've used in the past. So that's cool. But then of course, like, you know, you could, I mean, I don't want to go massively into the possibilities of Ableton Live, but it is worth just pointing out because this is kind of like, you know, kind of what we're using. So we could, you know, we've kind of got this click. So that click at the start of the kick drum, right, is a bit kind of punchy. We could, like, you know, where it's here, we could soften some of the envelopes, but that's not picking it up because the kick drum's actually in the decay. See what I mean? Because the envelope's open, the original sound of the SH101 kick drum is able to play. So I need to turn it off so it doesn't play, but then I'm missing my bass. So in situations like this, I mean, you could filter it, but it's then, I think, like going into Ableton Live, and we've got like our automation here, so we can, you know, we could sort of potentially just remove the click at the start. This kind of idea. So, you know, we've removed that click, or, you know, obviously you can just, there's lots of things you could do, but this keeps, there's something happening I've noticed today. Like I'll adjust the dial and then it will just jump when I'm doing something else. I don't know if this is an Ableton bug or something weird's going on. Something's weird's going on. So if you notice some sudden drops in volume or random volume, increases, I'm going to click off stuff, because it seems to be like I'm clicking somewhere and it's remembering I'm still highlighting on this or something. I don't know. It's probably the Analog Rytm's fault. So we've got like some sound there, and then we could, that's like pre-Analog Rytm, and then we could go into post-Analog Rytm. We've not got anything in here. We could drop another pedal in, and so it can get pretty crazy. So let's kind of explore. I'm just going to spend like a few minutes, see if it doesn't crash and weird out, just to explore some possibilities for just this kick drum, which I think might be fun. So yeah, I got pretty noisy pretty quickly. It's crazy, right? It's just crazy. So yeah, I'm going to put the project, well, not this actual audio project, because it's kind of, you know, it is what it is. It's just a bit of an experiment. But I'll put the template. I'll put the template for setting it up in the description, and then you can play around, set it up, and experiment. Like, I barely scratched the surface, and you can see how quickly and crazy it can kind of get. It definitely is. It definitely is a bit fiddly. Like trying to switch between this and then switch between Ableton Live and kind of know where stuff is going. You're probably going to get used to it. I'm having to record a video and switch screens and make sure stuff isn't crashing at the same time. So it's probably a bit easier when you're not doing that. But yeah, I think like once you get in the flow of it and you can kind of see where stuff is, you can feel the mind going, holy shit, this can go into some pretty crazy areas. I think also it would be really worth like capturing the audio of like, say that, that sort of SH101 kick drum, for example, and then, using the new audio capture sort of sampling sort of process since with 1.7. So it catches it to like a loop and then just sort of setting that loop point and maybe not triggering the sample, just like hitting the pad and just having it rotate. I'm not sure. I've kind of done stuff in the past that kind of does that, but my point being like having the sequence running its thing and the sample just independently looping on its own. So just having this loop set on, but not having it trigger, and then just sort of once you've triggered it, to turning it off. I can't remember if there's like a trig setting that's like a once only, like this thing. I don't think there is, because that would be really cool. We can just trigger it and then it never triggers again. But I think it's just a case of like, automating it or something. I forget. I'm sure I've done it. So I'm sure some of you know how to do that. But that could be quite cool, because then you could basically take like the processing of Ableton Live and all that kind of sort of workflow, and you want to take it portable and have it. It's not going to be the same, obviously, but it's going to get you somewhere quite quick. It reminds me of like, I can't remember. I think it's Pete Rock's younger brother. He was on YouTube like quite a few years ago talking about some of the tracks he did that Pete Rock used. And you see him kind of loading up his Akai disc, and he talks about like EQing on his stereo, like the records that he liked. So if he didn't want the bass, he would like turn the bass down the stereo, record it out into like headphones out or whatever into his Akai MPC, and then he would just like have that like raw sample, and then he could manipulate it in there, which is really, really powerful, because pitching down or pitching up or reversing or whatever, when you've just got like a sample already set up, something as simple as EQ is so powerful, because you just get into this real gritty area where the compressors and all the filters and everything kind of working differently. So this kind of setup reminds me of that, setting it up in Ableton, dumping it in here is really cool. So this kind of allows like you to have an Overbridge workflow where you're just experimenting, and then if you're like, I want to kind of capture that and have that as a sound, you're kind of already hooked up like with the Ableton Live like setup, and just sending the audio, and you just capture it because you're just capturing it on the pad. So that could be quite cool. I feel like my biggest problem is finding a space on a desk permanently, because I have to jiggle stuff around, but I've kind of got some new framework coming, so maybe it will be a bit more incorporated, and we can see some more audio videos, which would be amazing, because it's really cool doing these. It pushes me into different directions. I know it pushes some of you into different directions, so it's really, really exciting. But yeah, Overbridge is a big one. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope that was kind of useful. I'm not going to play some music out, because I feel like I've just done that. I'm just going to end it in silence. Cool. I'll catch you next one. Cheers.